Hello, I'm Justine Brown. Welcome back to my bookshelf. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. I am discussing the Spanish Armada from the Spanish perspective. The Spanish Armada of 1588 looms large in the Anglosphere imagination. It partakes of what Spanish historians call the Black Legend, the idea of the Spanish Imperium as peculiarly dark, menacing, bigoted, and cruel. The Spanish Armada is one of the great near misses of English history, and fanciful tales abound. For example, the Black Irish typically attribute their coloring to defeated Spanish sailors having washed up on the shores of Ireland. Many of us know scraps of the speech Elizabeth I is said to have given when she mustered the English troops at Tilbury. In this instance, Elizabeth claimed one of the female leader's key advantages. Allegorical figures are traditionally female, so she can fully embody her country. Elizabeth personifies England. Quote, "My good people, I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too, and think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm." Unquote. There is more of a hint of outraged female virtue here. Her weakness is her strength. Films like Elizabeth, the Golden Age, which stage this soliloquy so effectively, have done nothing to dispel the Black Legend, only amplifying the Whiggish narrative concerning Philip II of Spain. This Philip is a pantomime villain lurking in the shadows, rosaries clanking, sending imaginary killer priests to assassinate the tolerant Virgin Queen, and ultimately launching the Spanish Armada in a spirit of pure religious reaction. But, as they say, the first casualty in any war is truth. Absorbing this tidal wave of propaganda, we find it all too easy to forget that Philip II had certain reasons for invading Albion. What were they? Why did Philip launch the Spanish Armada? To begin with, the King of Spain had been a King of England too. Philip had been the husband of Mary I, so-called Bloody Mary. He became her widower in 1588. When we consider Mary's husband and her mother, we realize how closely England and Spain were connected until Elizabeth's reign. Mary Tudor was, of course, the only surviving child of the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife and the Queen of England. Catherine is typically depicted in films as a cartoon Spaniard with olive skin, black hair, thick eyebrows, and a thick foreign accent, not to mention melancholic, stuck in the past, and morbidly pious. Modernity's cheerleaders invariably characterize historical figures who oppose their program as mulishly stubborn. In fact, Catherine of Aragon was fair, with red gold hair. She spoke English well, since by the time she was displaced by one of her own ladies-in-waiting, the pert Anne Boleyn, Catherine had been living at the English court for over 20 years. She was a well-beloved queen. Multiple dizzying spins of fortune's wheel later, Mary Tudor ascended to the throne. She was crowned in 1553 and is considered to be England's first proper queen regnant. Mary was 37 years old, well advanced in age by 16th century standards. The new queen swiftly set about finding a husband with a view to producing an heir. Advisors like Bishop Gardiner, who crowned Mary and became her chancellor, counseled Mary to choose an Englishman. Even the Plantagenet Cardinal Reginald Pole was mooted. Instead, the queen married the Habsburg prince Philip, son of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. Philip, a considerably younger man, was heir to the Spanish throne, bringing access to vast New World territories and immense wealth. Mary was captivated by the courtship portrait painted by Titian that Philip had sent to woo her. Many of her subjects were worried, however, that a marriage between Mary and Philip would spell the relegation of their sceptred isle to the status of Spanish Habsburg backwater. One of the main problems associated with Queen's regnant arose immediately: the status of her husband, given the fact that kings outrank queens. Before the wedding, it was agreed that Philip would be styled King of England, de jure uxoris, by right of his wife. The fact that both were descended from John of Gaunt bolstered Philip's claim. However, Parliament made sure to limit his powers. Technically, Philip and Mary were co-monarchs of England and Ireland. So King Philip had a real stake in this realm, and when Mary died in 1558, he proposed marriage to his sister-in-law Elizabeth, despite the fact that she was a Protestant and the daughter of Anne Boleyn, a woman known in Habsburg circles as the concubine. Elizabeth was a less than ideal match for Philip, now Philip II of Spain, but he perceived a duty to keep England within the fold. Failing that, he believed he had a duty to promote the interests of English Catholics. We shall see that he never forgot them. Having been turned down by Elizabeth, then, Philip wed the eminently suitable French princess Elizabeth of Valois, whose brother, Francois II, was Mary, Queen of Scots' first husband. It was 1559, the same year that Elizabeth I reinstated her father's Act of Supremacy, making the monarch head of the Church for the simple reason that the Protestant model underpinned her identity and thus her power. Crucially, Protestantism gave her legitimacy, and it always had in both senses, first as a daughter and then as a monarch. In the Catholic paradigm, Elizabeth was little more than the offspring of a royal mistress, a bastard. Obviously, this was unacceptable to her and to her followers. The Anglican model, introduced by her father, made Elizabeth's claim to the throne solid. So the new queen overturned her sister Mary's restoration of Catholicism in England, officially speaking. The problem was, of course, that roughly half the population cleaved to the old religion. Protestantism was highly concentrated around London, especially among elites, while the balance of subjects would let the government set the tone and harmonize with that. As Elizabeth's reign unfurled, Catholics' loyalty to their deeply rooted ancestral religion led, ironically, to their redefinition as a subversive, foreign-aligned race within their own land. English Catholics were perceived as a threat to the state and punished accordingly under what were known as the penal laws, and the Elizabethan spying and torture apparatus grew rapidly. Meanwhile, the newfangled Anglican religion wrapped itself in the flag. The Protestant Revolution first divided the English into two distinct ethnicities. Then, as the fracture became a splintering of Anglicanism itself, it made for so many that by 1600, individual congregations had gone beyond the communitarianism of the local parish to conceive of themselves as discrete peoples. The Mayflower Brownists are a case in point. In any case, Mary's widower never dropped the reins when it came to the English. And the more that Elizabeth cracked down on her Catholic subjects, the more she increased the standing of this shadow king of England. Philip actually tried to dissuade Pope Pius V from issuing regnans in excelsis, the 1570 bull excommunicating the, quote, pretended Queen of England, unquote, as a heretic, and calling for resistance against her. Philip argued that the decree would further endanger English Catholics. And he was right. Not only did Spain have deep ties to England, it also had held sway over nearby Flanders, aka the Spanish Netherlands, modern Belgium, and part of northern France. These territories had long been ruled by Philip's family, the Habsburgs. Spain is some distance away from England, but the Spanish Netherlands lay just across the English Channel. Elizabeth, allied with the Protestant Dutch, routinely sought to undermine Catholic Flanders. For example, she supported rebellion against the government in that realm, headed up for many years by Philip II's half-sister, Margaret of Parma. Elizabeth also sanctioned persistent attacks on Spanish ships bound for and in the New World. Lacking a proper navy in comparison with the Spanish and having no standing army, she instead enlisted large numbers of private sailors as privateers. Elizabeth tended to wink at piracy in general. Notable privateers included Sir Francis Drake, Sir Walter Raleigh, and Sir Richard Hawkins. The Sea Dogs, as they were nicknamed, were directed to raid England's enemies, although the realm was not formally at war. All of this picking off and plundering rankled the Spanish, and relations worsened. This undermining worked both ways, of course. It was Philip who founded the famous English College at Douai, a seminary for English Catholics, in 1568. The English College, also a sanctuary for Oxford professors such as Father William Allen and others fleeing the Elizabethan regime, is best known for a 1588 English translation of the New Testament that influenced the King James Version, the Douai-Rheims Bible. The Douai-Rheims Old Testament would follow. Founded on Michaelmas Day as an invocation of the martial archangel St. Michael, the English College was on a mission to re-Catholicize England. Father William Allen was appointed Regius Professor. He oversaw the translation and educating of hundreds of English seminarians. Because these priests were necessarily trained abroad before returning to administer the sacraments in secret, Elizabeth's government could depict them as foreign elements. Of the 300 priests the English College sent back home to tend the faithful, 160 were executed, typically by hanging, drawing, and quartering. Many of these men have since been canonized, among them Shakespeare's cousin and fellow poet, Robert Southwell. His work, The Burning Babe, was Ben Jonson's favorite poem. St. Robert Southwell served London's Catholic underground in the household of Anne Howard, Countess of Arundel, until his arrest in 1595. He was worked over 3 times by the Queen's torturer-in-chief, Richard Topcliffe, but revealed nothing. On the scaffold, St. Robert Southwell freely admitted to being a Roman Catholic priest, but denied plotting to overthrow the Queen. One of the poet-priest's most famous works, Decease Release, points to the ultimate trigger for the Spanish Armada, the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. The Stuart Queen had fled into England, seeking Elizabeth's aid against the unruly Scottish lords, one of whom had care of her son James. Instead, she found herself imprisoned there for 20 long years. Mary, Queen of Scots, presented a political threat to the Virgin Queen because she had an excellent claim to the thrones of England and Ireland through her grandmother, Margaret Tudor, the wife of James IV of Scotland. But locking up her cousin, an acknowledged heir, did not solve Elizabeth's problem. She found herself in a kind of trap as well. As the fortunes of English Catholics foundered, Mary, Queen of Scots, became the focus of a series of plots to overthrow Elizabeth. Once Mary had abandoned the hope that her cousin Queen would help restore her to the Scottish throne, she began to look for rescue by France the Holy Roman Emperor, or Spain. Mary became the ultimate princess in the Tower for all Catholic Europe. Philip II had been preparing an invasion in earnest since 1586. Mary, Queen of Scots, went on trial for her role in the Babington plot. Shortly after, she faced the executioner at Fotheringay Castle in 1587. Mary removed her outer robe to reveal a red garment, red being the color of Catholic martyrdom. She fully inhabited that role. St. Robert Southwell writes, quote, God's spice I was, and pounding was my due. In fading breath my incense savoured best. Death was my mean, my kernel to renew. By lopping shot I up to heavenly rest. Alive a queen, now dead I am a saint. Once Mary called, my name now martyr is. From earthly reign debarred by restraint, in lieu whereof I reign in heavenly bliss. Unquote. The news of Mary's death reverberated throughout Europe. The execution of one anointed monarch by another set a dangerous precedent, which could not be ignored. Considerable enmity had developed between Spain and England, as we have seen, but ultimately Mary, Queen of Scots, was the face that launched the Spanish Armada. With Mary dead, Philip proposed to topple Elizabeth in favor of his 22-year-old daughter, Isabella Clara Eugenia. The historical record reveals that both sides expected half the English to rise in support of the Spanish once they landed, which of course they never did, owing partly to storms and partly to fierce fighting. We seldom hear of the English counter-armada launched against Spain the following year. It was vanquished in much the same way. Isabella Clara Eugenia went on to rule alongside her husband, Albert VII, Duke of Austria, in Flanders. Her patronage and policy helped generate the great Flemish Baroque era. Isabella's reign is viewed, much like Elizabeth's, as a golden age of culture. This Armada's failure tightened Elizabeth's hold on the throne. She wagered that virginity would preserve her rule better than marriage to Philip of Spain or any other man, but in so doing she failed to provide for her country's future in the form of an heir. Her most famous prisoner had already done so. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do comment below. I look forward to hearing from you.